I'm a software engineer and I quit my job of 4 years in Japan. Whilst my company was based in Tokyo, I live in the countryside. And this worked fine with my fully remote job, that is until recently, when, like a lot of companies around the world, my workplace also started to call everyone back into the office. And with the absolute money and time sink commuting to Tokyo was going to be, it was time for me to quit and find a new job. And I tell you, finding a new job in Japan was so much harder than I expected. But I have now started at my new company. And whilst Amy and I don't usually talk much on YouTube about what we do for work, I thought with the months-long laborious job hunt process fresh in my mind, this was a good opportunity to give some insight into what it's like working in Japan. The working culture here has a pretty bad rep. Long hours, lots and lots of overtime, sometimes a lot of red tape, maybe not flexible at all. This is 100% a reality for some people working in Japan, and one of the reasons why my job search was so long and drawn out, because I didn't want it to be my reality. And let me tell you, some places I interviewed with, you could see straight away it was going to be like that. But this isn't the only reality in Japan. And after months of job searching, I have landed myself in a role that so far is going pretty well. And it is quite a bit more Japanese than my last role, actually. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But first we need to talk about the grueling process that was getting a job in the first place. A bit of context, I worked for a few years in the IT industry in Australia, and then I got my first job in Japan as a software engineer back in 2021. This job was a mix of Japanese and Western culture and fully remote from the start of COVID up until the end of the 4 years I was there. An important point is that I live in countryside Japan. I really love the slower paced lifestyle of the countryside. However, the downside of course is all the IT jobs are in the city. So when looking for a new job, a fully remote position was a must, and this narrowed my search pool down quite significantly. In the end, I interviewed with about 15 different companies, so let's start with what that process was like. First of all, to search and apply for software engineer jobs, I used LinkedIn, job boards like Japan Dev, recruiters, and in some cases, I applied directly through the company's website. Recruiters are a big thing in the IT industry in Japan, but were they helpful? Honestly, it was a bit of a mixed bag for me. It felt like the majority were serving up the same jobs that were already publicly advertised. It was kind of hard to tell whether a recruiter actually had an inside connection with the company, and the recruiters didn't really want to tell you the details of the vague job description that they had on offer until they had signed you up for a call where they would write down all your details. So it kind of felt like a time waste in a lot of situations. I did find recruiters quite helpful though when it came to applying for jobs in Japanese. About half the companies I applied for needed a Japanese resume, and the recruiters really helped me polish mine up. They also gave me insights into what questions I could expect in Japanese when I did take an interview. Now, on to the actual interview process, guys. It was long. Each company was a little different. There were usually around 4 to 5 steps though. First, there was sometimes an online screening test. It's like a short test with some vaguely programming related questions. For any developers watching this, most of the companies use HackerRank or LeetCode, and I will die on the hill that these tests are not good representations of developers' competency, but that's another story. After that, for about half the companies, there was a take-home coding test. At this step, it was honestly hard to decide how much of my own time I wanted to put into these tests. For some of them, you could easily use 15 to 20 of your own hours to make a really nice demonstration, but then you're risking spending all this time for the high likelihood that you're not even going to get selected. Beyond this, there were an additional 2 to 3 rounds of interviews. One with HR, then at least 1, if not 2 interviews with the higher tech team, and then a final interview with the CEO or maybe the CTO. So yeah, generally the interview process for each job was pretty long, and then when you had a few going on at one time, it became super overwhelming, especially when you're trying to work full time at the same time. Almost all the jobs I went for were really competitive too. I think if you were open to any working conditions, like not just fully remote, this wouldn't be the case so much. I was already limiting my pool of potential jobs by only looking for fully remote, and then on top of that, I was really prioritizing jobs that didn't have much or like any overtime. One last consideration is both times I've been through the job hunt process in Japan, I'd already been in the country. This definitely gives you an advantage compared to applying from overseas, as some companies are only looking for someone who already has a visa to work in Japan. In the end, the way I got my job was actually through a referral. I made it through to the final interview for one job, but in the end, didn't get selected. However, one of the engineers I interviewed with told his friend, who was a manager at my now new company, about me. And I think a referral carried a lot of weight and helped me go through the whole interview process and actually get the job. So the job, as I said earlier, it's more Japanese than my last. The CEO, as well as the surrounding company, is Japanese, and so, of course, in the wider company, the language we use is Japanese. The dev team is much bigger than any team I've worked on before, with around 20 members, and everyone is actually from different countries around the world. Within the team, we do use English a lot, except when I join front-end dev meetings once a week, which are in Japanese. This is my first time doing meetings at work in Japanese, and whilst I've certainly been a bit nervous for the first couple, I actually super like having the opportunity to use more Japanese in the workplace. Very quickly, I passed the JLPT N2 a couple of years ago. For those that don't know, the JLPT is the go-to language test for Japanese. It has 5 levels, from the easiest, which is N5, to the most difficult, which is N1. Usually it's said that you need at least N2 to work in a Japanese environment. This level has definitely been enough for me to navigate everyday life in the countryside. But when it comes to work, honestly for me, I don't think it's enough. I have an all right foundation for working in Japanese, but it's definitely something I'll need to build on so I can feel I can actually express myself eloquently about any topic and without breaking into like a full body nervous sweat. So that's a basic overview of my job. I'll talk more about general things like paid leave and sick leave soon, but first,
let's talk about a completely different reality of working in Japan, and that is English teaching. Unlike Roy, I started in English teaching and then I transitioned into what I do now, which is videography. And I think that this is a story which is pretty common for a lot of people, first starting out in English teaching in Japan and then transitioning into something else. And the main reality that I want to share about this is, guys, it can be really, really difficult. From when I first came to Japan, it took me about 3 years to transition into what I do now. And honestly, there were quite a few times where I felt like, am I going to be able to make this work at all? And of course, this is not the case for everyone. Some people get transferred here from their jobs back in their home country, or if you are like Roy, then you have a few years experience in your field in your home country and you come here and it can be easier to get a job. But for those who are like me and start in English teaching, just to achieve that ideal work life and therefore your ideal overall life that you want in Japan, you're going to need to learn the language, you're going to need to adapt to the job market in Japan and build those skills up in that field that you want to work in and get that job that's going to eventually be sustainable and long-term for you. But first, let me go back to the start and talk about how I made that transition. Roy and I first came to Japan on a working holiday visa, and then I transitioned into teaching English in an eikaiwa, which is called a English conversation school. And honestly, it's kind of hard to comment on English teaching and the experience generally in Japan because it really will depend on where you are in Japan and whether you're working as an assistant language teacher in a school or in a private conversation school like I was. For me personally, my experience was just fine. It was just fine. It was good in the sense that the students were really, really lovely, and I could have freedom to tailor my individual lessons to the individual students themselves. I really enjoyed that. However, the big downside for me was the environment. Honestly, most of the teachers didn't want to be there, and it made for a pretty negative space. Now, of course, I understand that. I felt a little bit like that too. There were things like a very, very low salary, 250,000 yen, and you just felt a little bit expendable as well, like you weren't valued in the job. So that was my experience. But of course, if you watch a lot of content about Japan online, then you're probably already familiar with this story about English teaching. And for me, after a couple of years doing that, I was like, I gotta find something long-term and something different in Japan. So my background is that I studied to be a science teacher in Australia, but I was in this weird spot where I didn't have any professional experience because we came to Japan immediately after I graduated. So I was kind of like, is it gonna be possible for me to get a job in an international school? At the same time, while I was doing that English teaching, I was also spending pretty much all of my free time doing YouTube videos, making YouTube videos about usually traveling around Japan. So I wondered, could I turn this creative hobby into an actual job with a visa? So I got my portfolio ready. I started researching just a bunch of different companies, tourism companies, media companies, and I was just searching for a job. Basically, I was just looking on each individual company's website to see if they were advertising job openings. I also just cold emailed a few different companies. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend doing that. I did actually get a reply saying, sorry, we're not looking to hire anyone at this time. So you never know. You just don't know what's going to be happening. But long story short, what happened was I applied for a job at a company called Tokyo Cheapo. It was for a YouTube producer position. And after quite a few interviews and doing a paid test video, I got the job. Actually, if you're specifically looking for creative jobs in Japan, Tokyo Cheapo actually now has a creative job boards on their website where they advertise different creative job position openings. So I would recommend that. But basically for myself, what I'd like to say is I did work hard. Yes, I worked hard to build up all of those skills, but it was also a little bit of luck and being in the right place at the right time. See, at the time that I was applying, the borders, Japan's borders, were about to open up after COVID had finished. So I was kind of perfectly in this position where I was already in the country and I had these videography skills. And so all of the media and the tourism companies that were looking to start up again with the borders opening, they were there, I was there, and it was definitely helpful in getting the job. This idea that landing a job is a combination of your skills, your effort, and also this opportunity or luck is definitely a concept that's not unique to Japan. But when you combine it with the added pressure of needing to have a visa to stay in the country, it definitely adds quite a lot of stress. So let me give you some concrete examples, some more from friends who have done a similar thing. So for example, in the creative industry, in positions like writers, videographers, editors, I've had friends who have been English teachers full-time, so that's how they got their visa, and then they would apply for special permission from immigration to work freelance or part-time at a media company. And then by doing so, once a full-time position became available at that company, they already had their foot in the door, so they were more likely to be considered for that position. Another example is we had a friend who was, again, working as a full-time English teacher, but they just spent all of their time learning Japanese to get to N1 level and taking programming courses so that they could skill up in that area. And over a few years, they were able to transition out of English teaching and into a full-time job in a different field. These are definitely not the only ways to make a career in Japan. And honestly, I can really only speak to my experience. And I'm speaking as a foreigner in Japan. That's my reality of working in Japan. And I'm also speaking as a white Australian English-speaking foreigner. So my experience is not going to be representative of all foreigners in Japan. But I hope that by sharing a little bit of that experience, it gives some ideas on how you could make a career in Japan. And I definitely think that if you are willing to learn the language and to skill up and a little bit just wait for that luck and that right time to give you the opportunity to start that career, then it can come. Now, on to talking about how much Japanese do you need to work in Japan. I think as anyone will tell you, the more Japanese you have, the more opportunities open up to you in Japan. And this is across all fields. However, I would say that the IT industry is a place where people often say, you don't need Japanese, right?
I would say so. Definitely is that sentiment, and especially a few years ago, it was quite strongly leaning towards not needing any Japanese. And even now, there are plenty of positions that are available in like only English. But what is difficult is that it's so much easier for all the foreigners who are here in Japan to apply for those jobs, because everyone knows English as a foreigner here, usually. So they become insanely competitive, you know, having Japanese knowledge and being able to branch out into those more Japanese leaning like companies and stuff just broadens your horizons so much.
So that's IT, right?
Yeah.
And then in my field, it is media, and I also need Japanese. And actually, before I did say that my job was Tokyo Cheapo, that was where I first started to do videography, but now I'm actually in a different company called Japan Guide. And the main reason why I moved there, I loved Tokyo Cheapo, but I wanted to better my actual videography skills, be behind the camera, and that's what I'm doing there. So I'm behind the camera filming and I'm editing. And in my day-to-day work, my team is all English speaking. I also work with a team of Japanese people, but they are also English speaking. But I need to use Japanese pretty much 100% when I go on shoots, when I go out filming. And so that's at least once a month, if not a couple of times a month. And I need to use Japanese because I'm usually speaking to business owners, I'm speaking to locals, or I'm speaking to clients. I would say that I'm like Roy, I have N2 level Japanese, and like Roy, I would say that it is not enough. I still want to get a lot better. And I would say that it's both needing to know the language as well as needing to know the culture a little bit as well and the way things are done. So a lot of the time I will turn up on a shoot and I will need to introduce myself to the business owners, to clients. So I brought my business card holder, although I will get out my IC card. It's got no information on it. And you know, when I go into a shoot, there will be sometimes 3-4 people that I need to introduce myself to. I think the biggest I've had is 9 people on a shoot, including myself, that I need to go around and introduce myself to everyone, right? And as you may have heard, there are, you know, little things. You want to hold your business card with both hands, and you know, you've got to do the Japan Guide no Gardner Amy to moshimasu. Hai, yoroshiku onegai shimasu. When I'm receiving the card, chodai itashimasu. Bow. I'll be honest, when it is a big group and we're doing the rounds with everyone, I'm a little bit like, oh my God, I'm collecting so many business cards, like the Pokemon trading cards, like on top of my holder here. And then I'm like, what do I do? What's the polite thing to do? Oh my God, like when do I put it away? I'm still very much like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. But yeah, that's one thing. And then specifically in the media industry, in terms of like things that you should know working in Japan in that industry, a big one is that privacy is really important in Japan. So that dictates a lot of my work, because if I'm at a busy train station, for example, I will need to wait until everyone is out of the frame or you can't see their faces. So it does make my work quite a lot harder. I do have to wait a lot of the time, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate the idea that you might be just a normal person going through the train station on your way to work, you might not be looking your best that day, but you're not going to be filmed and it's going to be put up somewhere, you know? I really do like those privacy regulations. So knowing the language is important, but also knowing how things are done and culturally as well as just business-wise. The last thing, I'll throw it back to you.
Oh God.
Because you specifically did interviews in Japanese. I've never interviewed in Japanese. And particularly your job that you actually got, right?
Yeah.
He did the final interview with the CEO and a bunch of other people in Japanese.
It was awful. There was like a whole panel of people that I had to speak in front of. Oh, it was awful. I mean, like, you just need to know certain phrases. If you're at like a comfortable speaking level, you should be able to talk about yourself and stuff like that. But it's not also just kind of translating what you'd say in English into Japanese. You kind of just, what Amy was saying as well, need to know like the customaries as well. You know, you always start like a meeting with like "Otsukaresama desu" when you're like greeting your coworkers and stuff like that. And you need to know these like little like nuances of like when you finish your interview with like someone who's very awry, someone who's really like high up in the company, you need to like say this one set phrase of like "Kichou na jikan o itadaki arigatou gozaimashita," stuff like that. And like if you can kind of nail those things, you can look really good in your interviews, I like to think. But yeah, knowing these things kind of just comes down to just practice and hearing from other people who have done it. Even like ChatGPT, that was an absolute lifesaver. And I spent countless hours setting my own phone up on the windowsill and just recording myself doing my little questions, like rehearsed questions and answers.
今までスタートアップ的な会社で勤めており、この8年の経験を生かしてなんで
Bro, what am I even saying? Yeah, anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it, I like to think.
So that is Japanese in Japan, you know, do you need it for work? And let's move on to more general things like paid leave and sick leave. How do we feel about it?
It's not great, is it?
It's definitely like one of the biggest things that we're a little bit like, oh, I wish that this was a bit different in Japan. Well, the stock standard in Japan is 10 days in your first year, and then over the course of 6 years, you can get up to 20 days. And then from then on, you'll have 20 days each year.
And it's all good that like maybe some companies out there actually do give more than that, but I think the vast majority is just a company is just going to kind of stick to those labor laws.
Yeah, I think so. And then this is the kicker, guys, when you leave and start at a new company, that time starts again. So when you go to the new company, you'll be back to 10 days per year paid leave, which is exactly what happened to you. You got up to like 16 days, I think.
Yeah.
I'm back to 10.
Back to 10. I mean, can't be helped.
It is what it is, yeah. And then another thing is sick leave. In the labor laws, it's not a thing, as in like companies don't have to provide sick leave.
Yep.
So a lot don't. A lot of people take paid leave if they get sick or they come to work.
So that's the kind of general case, but some companies give sick leave. Perhaps maybe a general trend is that the more international a company is, the more likely it's going to give you sick leave.
Yeah. Sick leave. I personally think it's very important.
So important.
You don't want to be having to worry about working when you're sick. So that is paid and sick leave in Japan. But let's now get into salaries in Japan, because I think that this video wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about salaries and be a little bit transparent on what you can expect in Japan. So the national average for the country is 4.6 million per year.
And I think it's a little bit more in the kind of Tokyo area, of course, because living expenses are more expensive in the city.
Yes, that's true. And then for our specific industries, so you were going for a senior software engineer role.
Yeah.
And what were the ranges for salaries you were looking at?
I think it kind of went anywhere from like 7 million at the absolute minimum to like the senior ones can get absorbent. It can be like the average max range is like maybe 12 million. But then there can be some really highly specialized positions which are like 20 million plus kind of thing. But those are really rare, of course.
Would you say that they're more in international companies as well?
Yeah, I guess so. But also, there's those really specialized fields like AI and machine learning and stuff like that, like big data, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so I would say that IT is a field that's definitely has wages on the higher side. And then for my field, for a videographer, I've seen salary ranges of around 4 million to 7 million. So a bit higher than the average, the national average, but still, much closer to that than an IT role.
Yeah. But we're both sitting on like very average, salaries for like our industries, right?
I would say so, yeah.
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 And it can be very comfortable to like live on those salaries, especially like out in the countryside.
Right, yes. I think that's something that people like to know in terms of being in Japan. The salaries are lower than, for example, our home country of Australia, or perhaps in the United States, in the United Kingdom. But does the cost of living make up for that? And probably you've heard the cost of living is also rising recently in Japan as well. For us personally, we live in the countryside. Yeah, I would say I feel as though we can save money. We can put money away. We can comfortably live, all of our living expenses, as well as, do nice things as well, like go out on the weekend. And
Totally. Yeah, we did a whole video just breaking down those costs. So if you want to know more details, check that out.
And then from your salary specifically, there are a bunch of things that come out before you get it, right? So the things that come out are income tax, there is city tax that comes out, there is social insurance. So that includes your healthcare. So when you are a full-time employee like us, your company handles your healthcare and you have to pay around 30% when you go to the doctor, and the other 70% is paid for. But it's fairly cheap. When I go to the doctor, sometimes it might only be 1,000 yen, for example.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. And then pension comes out as well. So you have to pay into the national pension system. And if we retired in Japan, we would get that. I believe if we left Japan before we'd lived here for 10 years, we can get some of that back. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure on that. It's something that's on my list to look into, just to know, about our retirement options and all of that. But
that's coming up anytime soon.
None of that's coming up, but you got to be prepared,
Sure.
What should we do with our lives and our retirement?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just a little bit more into, what you can actually expect in terms of the net pay that you get, right? Because by the time you take all of that out, your net pay is a bit lower.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, combining all these things that we just talked about, that is our reality in Japan. And I hope the thing that you take from this video is that our reality is not the only reality out there. And the reality that you hear from other people is also not the only reality out there. It really depends on all the circumstances going on in your life here in Japan.
Yeah, I really, really hope that just at least by sharing what our reality is at this current time and up until now, it just gives a little bit of a little window into what it could be like.
Yeah, but that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. We've got other videos on our channel. Please check them out and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.